We will now turn the time to Dr. Kiefer's presentation titled, Addiction, How Do We Combat a Disease That Persuades Us We Don't Have It?
All right. Am I wired up now? Can you hear me? That's it. That's addiction right there. I'm done. All right. So, forgot. So, what does an alcoholic addict look like? This is what everybody in the world thinks, right? I think it looks like this, like this. Some of you young people probably don't even know what that is. All right. It's like, what's the part on the back there? So, what does an alcoholic addict do? I love this one, family kidnapped by ninjas need money for karate. Right? Now, I don't know if going from that to Congress is really showing a good spread in society or not, but then we got this guy, he's a great success story. She unfortunately didn't. Lawyers, doctors, actors. I'm not suggesting Denzel Washington's an addict, but you can see this movie. The interesting thing, I was going over my slides this morning, I turned the TV on, and I'm not kidding you, what movie was on? Flight. I don't know what that means, but the bottom line is addiction is an equal opportunity destroyer, right? So what does an alcoholic addict look like? Looks like me, all right? Now one of the first things I ever did as far as talking about addiction, I went to a high school with two other people, and I think Bev sent me there, and Joe. And I was trying to figure out how do I differentiate? And so when I got up, I said, what do you guys think I do for a living? And it was funny. They were thinking, truck driver. One of them said baker. I have no clue why they came up with baker. But then I said, no, I'm an interventional cardiologist. And it was like, whoa, what? And that's sort of sad, really, that they're like, okay, no, you're a doctor. You can't be an addict. But that's the point. This thing will take out anybody, right? So this is me. I'm in the medical field since I was 18. I did advanced life support medic in California while I went to college. Graduated from med school in 1988. That makes me feel, it's like I shouldn't put that up there. I did heart transplant, heart failure, general invasive interventional cardiology, and then father of four, grandfather of four. Now, some of you guys, this will be a trivia, brush with greatness, if you will. My boss for heart transplant was Dale Renlund. You guys know Dale Renlund? Amazing guy, okay. I knew him during residency, and then also, and there's a story I could tell in a second here about him too. So, a number of years ago, after some things happened in my life you heard about, I started up this company, Motivational Medicine. I'm the founder and CEO of it. Impressive, huh? I'm also the secretary, the janitor, and the handyman, okay? It's a company of one. I made it up for my talks and that stuff. About 3 years ago, I was at an addiction conference in Vegas, of all things, a behavioral addiction conference in Vegas. And Mike Jorgensen called me. I was just going in to see Patrick Carnes. You guys know who he is? He's like a big guy in codependency and sexual addiction stuff. I was just walking in and I hear this message from Mike. And so after the meeting, I went and talked to him. We met the next day in a diner near the airport because he was flying out of town on a Sunday, and the next day he hired me. So it's been just over 3 years, the medical director at Steps Recovery Center. Now, this is not to show you stuff like, this is some of the talks I have. It'll show you I come up with goofy titles. But this is to remind me about the next slide is everywhere I go and talk, I always want to say, I'm not a world's expert in this stuff, okay? I'm here with, professor this and professor that and doctor that and stuff. And then Bev's the clinical director, and she had part of my recovery and stuff, I'm not really a world's expert in this stuff. All I am, is this thing working? Is I tell everybody, I'm a doctor, a dad, and a dude, okay? And what I mean by that, if we translate that into like AA words, I'm here to share my experience, strength, and hope, okay? And I like to tell this to everybody because you guys all have some experience, right? You've hopefully developed some strength and gained some hope. And I talk to our residents and their families about once a month in our facilities, and I tell them, even those guys that are in residential treatment have gained hopefully some experience, hopefully some strength, and hopefully hope. I hope I say stuff that actually is beneficial, and if so, I want you to go share it, okay? That's the whole point of this, and that's the whole point of recovery, okay? Sometimes I use words I don't understand so I can sound more photosynthesis. All right, that summarizes the rest of the talk, okay? Hey, have you guys seen this movie? This movie, when the game stands tall. I remember it came out in the movie theater, and James Caviezel's in it, and it's all about this football team that won 151 games in a row or something, never lost in 10 years. I'm like, I don't want to go to a movie all about rah, 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 we won. So I didn't go see it. And then it came out on HBO, on HBO when it was there. I'm like, still don't want to watch it. And then you ever had one of those Saturdays, you got 200 channels and nothing to watch? All right, so I watched it. Well, I was surprised. It actually is not about win. Actually, the game starts out with their last 151st win, okay? And afterwards, the seniors are talking to the underclassmen and go, you guys got to keep this going? You guys got to keep our record going, right? And so they, next year, before in the off season, their coach has a heart attack, and one of their star players gets shot in the drive-by. And they lose the first 2 games of the next year. The movie wasn't about win. It was going through adversity and coming back from it, which they did. And that's what we're here to talk about. Like, to fall is life, to get back up is living, right? It's one of my favorite quotes, okay? I like metaphors and stuff like that, probably because I go to too many AA meetings, I don't know. You'll also notice I have some slides in here to entertain myself. But fulminology is a study of lightning, and astrophobia is the fear of lightning, okay? And, lightning's scary. You go out, and you don't want to go out and get struck by lightning. You just be afraid of it. But the interesting thing is lightning is very important in our survival. There's only a certain number of ways to make nitrates in the soil, which we need for fertilizer, right? And we now, around World War II, we figured out some ways to do it. But before that, what happens is we got nitrogen in the atmosphere. There's more nitrogen than oxygen, right? They're bound really tightly together, and it takes a really strong force to break that nitrogen apart, like lightning, okay? So lightning hits the atmosphere and then breaks it down to ammonia and nitrates, so we can grow things, okay? Rotting corpses can do it, and I was talking once to the residents and says, so lightning could cause us a rotting corpse, and so they went there, but anyway. So, sometimes there's stuff that is really scary and dangerous, but you can get some positive out of it. That's sort of the metaphor of that. So, Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be an addict. Son, you can't do both, right? Nobody, when they're young, wanted to grow up to be an addict, right? Including me, okay? This is me. I just turned 14. My mom's pinning my Eagle Scout on my, where's all the oohs and ahs, man? Oh, come on, yeah. Troop 5, all right. So when I got that, I didn't think I was going to have a problem, right? So this is the way we think. Does this pointer thing work? Oh, I can hardly see it. This is the way we think life's going to be. Maybe a little bit uphill, but we're going to just paddle along and we're going to get to the finish line, right? But this is not the way it really is. This is life, right? Got all these obstacles and pitfalls and stuff, right? And we got to work on that. Now, in my life, I've had a number of obstacles and pitfalls. I've had a few bad relationships, okay? A couple of divorces, all right? And those were bad, all right? And that was a real traumatic to me and stuff. But the worst trauma in my life came on July 6, 2008, excuse me. Excursion traveling back from Lake Powell, speeding along, towing 2 trailers. One was a big boat, and behind that was jet skis. It's only illegal in a few states. And the wind kicked up, they're speeding along, the trailers wobbled around, and the car flipped over. Caused this horrific accident. And my baby girl was killed. This is Alyssa. 10/20/2000, she was born. 10/20/2000 at 1:02 p.m. I thought that was amazing. Anyway, this is my baby. And this is what got me where I am here, okay? Just a second. I almost died from this stuff, the grief. And I go around, my first talks about grief and loss, the medical ramifications of grief and loss. I was getting sick all the time. We'll talk a little bit about this at the end. And I couldn't figure out, why am I getting sick all the time? I used to joke I could drive by a daycare and catch a cold, because my immune system was so bad. And then I started drinking myself to sleep, okay? And it went to the point where, I don't know, all of a sudden the switch goes off, and you can't go back. It's like the Hotel California. Once you check in, you can't get out, right? And all of a sudden there's that craving and obsession, and so I was drinking myself to sleep. So I needed to go get help. Two of the people that helped me are right over there. And I needed to work on this. And part of my survival, which I think we'll talk later about, was doing what I'm doing right now, okay? So addiction, sociopathic killer, right? Has no conscience, no regret. It's not prejudice. We talked about that, right? It's like a predator on the Serengeti. It can go after the weak and hobbled, the weak and defenseless, or it could be insidious like a virus. Get in you, multiply and divide until it kills you like Ebola, right? It takes everything you have and everything you're gonna have. You're an alcoholic. I was in one of those toxic relationships, and whenever I mention relationships with my residents, it gives me an opportunity to tell them, don't get any relationships for over a year. Anyway, my record is 10 times in an hour. Anyway, but you're an alcoholic. I had one person I was with when I was right after recovery, and she used this as a punchline. Every time I did anything wrong, I left a yogurt thing on the can. You're an alcoholic. And it was just sort of like a punchline. But being an alcoholic is not who I am, right? It's actually more like what had me, right? So what is an alcoholic addict? To talk about that, what's addiction? A lot of people think it's lack of willpower, right? Lack of education. It's a bad choice. Morality issue, right? You heard these things? Psychological problem, brain disease, or social disease, or a spiritual disease. Most of us in the business, okay, think it's like these 4 things, not that other stuff, okay? Now, if you have a problem you have to deal with, if you don't recognize the problem, you can't fix it, right? This is a slide from, it was a big ad for one of the big companies. I don't know, it was Merck, Pfizer, I don't know, for one of those drugs. The first second I saw it, I started busting up laughing, all right? And I wasn't laughing because this guy's wearing a gown of shame or this guy's got a $2 stethoscope around his neck, okay? Anybody know why I was laughing? Because the x-ray's upside down and backwards. And this is a big ad from a multi-billion-dollar company. But I saw it right away because I recognized the problem. But if we don't recognize the problem, we can't fix it. Obviously, they put that out there. So recognize the problems. Only 1 in 10 people get treatment that need treatment. That's a problem. Stigma of addiction hinders objectivity. There's an ignorance and indifference to the healthcare providers and the general public, availability of drugs to youth, and addiction's a healthcare problem, but not often treated as such. Now, there's a lot of other problems too. This is some of the ones I just came up with, okay? Now, let's talk about some of these problems. We think 11%, about 1 in 10 people who need treatment get treatment. The problem with that is how many people need treatment? How many people that are drinking and using go around bragging that they were drinking and using? I guess I am now about the past. But I mean, how many? There's a stigma. So really, if this is the size of the pie, how do we know that the size of the pie is not bigger, okay? So the point is there's probably a lot more people needing treatment, and it's a lot worse than we think, okay? There's a stigma of addiction, right? Society looks down on addicts. Some people don't get treatment. That's my student taking a picture in a second. How you doing? All right. So some doctors won't get, sorry, I'm not ADHD. Hey, is that a squirrel? Oh, sorry. Some doctors won't get treat addicts. This is one of my pet peeves. And some pharmaceutical companies won't work towards developing new treatments, which is crazy. I mean, you could think you could get a bunch of drugs for this. Now, I'm going to read this, and I apologize for that, but American Journal of Public Health, Ernest Bishop, wrote this. There's an urgent need for widespread and every early education, medical profession, blah, 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 blah. As a definite clinical entity of physical disease, addiction is practically untaught in the school and unappreciated by the average medical man. In light of the available clinical information and study, and in light of the competent laboratory research, we are forced, as a profession, to admit we have not treated our addiction sufferers with sympathetic understanding and clinical competency, and that the blame for the past failure to control the narcotic drug problem rests largely upon educational inadequacy of the medical profession. All right? You guys all agree with that? Agree with what he just wrote? So why the heck am I putting it up there? Because this dude wrote it in 1919. He could have written it yesterday, right? So we've come a little ways, okay? We've had some improvement. But we need more, okay? This is like 20 years before Dr. Bill W. I mean, holy smokes, okay? So another problem is source of opiates. You guys see these late night guys that go out on the streets of LA or something, and they'll say, are you on a gluten-free diet? Yeah, you know what gluten is? No. Or I love the one that's like, does this guy have a pot license in California? But if they went out and they went to this and they said, you know what, where does an opiate addict get their opiates? Probably a lot of people would think it was in a dealer or something, right? Not the case. From a dealer, it's about 5% of people get it from a dealer. This is a bad one, 18% from prescribing doctors. I went to the International Doctors AA meeting in Keystone, Colorado about 5 years ago, and there was a talk, my doctor, my pusher. So that's a big problem. 70% get it from family and friends. And this is the part I want to bring up, okay? We need more education, okay? If you get pills, you don't want to just leave them around in your cupboard and stuff. Remind me, I was driving with my son-in-law once, and there was a comedian on, he was talking about, he went to his mom's house and said, Mom, I got a headache, and she opened this cupboard full of pills. She says, well, do you want to like not feel your head or be asleep for 3 days, okay? That could have been my mom when I go to her house. But we need to educate people. Dispose of these things are appropriate. Don't give them out, okay? They'll steal them from you, okay? So this is one of the problems we need to deal with, and the doctors. This is one about the doctors, okay? I remember in the early 90s, mid-90s, they came around and they started telling us, you know what, you're not using enough opiates. People are in pain, and if they're in pain, they're not going to get addicted. They actually got sued for that one. Anyway, but we saw that this stuff worked. They brought us lunch, they sent people to these things, and we can see that the sales for opiates went up, 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 up. And guess what? Deaths went up, 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 up. You had overdoses, right? This is a problem that we're trying to deal with. And the CDC, FDA has come out, and they've had black box warnings and stuff about not prescribing, but we still need work on that, okay? One of the things is people will come out and say, addiction is not a disease, it's a choice. Calling it a disease just gives an excuse, right? Therefore, it's a problem for the police, not healthcare. Well, all this is BS, 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 and we're going to talk about that. I hate being bipolar. It's awesome. I laugh at this thing every time I see it. That's why it's in there. It's not there for you guys. Isn't that funny? So what is a disease, okay? Here's some just out of books. An abnormal condition affects the body of an organism. A medical condition associated with specific signs and symptoms, all right? Caused by an external source, like infection or internal problem like autoimmune disease. I like this one the best. In humans, disease is often used more broadly to refer to any condition that causes pain, dysfunction, social problems, or death to the afflicted or similar problems for those in contact with them. I love this one because I'm talking to families, and those in contact with them. I mean, this is one that fits in with our problem we're dealing with. So, how do we define a disease, okay? There was those definitions there. Another way is we can say that there's an organ that has a problem. There's a defect in that organ, all right? And then there's signs and symptoms of that defect in that abnormality, okay? So again, I'm entertaining myself. We got an organ, all right? And I don't know how fast these things go. We've got a defect in that organ, all right? And what are the signs and symptoms? It doesn't work, right? Okay, it plays bad. All right, so you got the idea, right? I got to dumb things down for myself, okay? All right, so I'm a board-certified cardiologist also. So let's talk about the heart as an organ, all right? Heart's the organ. We have a defect, and we have some cholesterol buildup. We have narrowing. We might have some damage from a heart attack. Up here, we have a scan showing some limited blood flow right to that area. So we have the defect. Now, we have signs and symptoms. Things like chest pain, shortness of breath, heart attack, death, okay? So you get the idea. Organ, defect, signs and symptoms. In addiction, the organ is the brain, right? And we're talking about the defect as in the central part of the brain. Again, entertaining myself. And we got signs and symptoms. We got tolerance, withdrawal, continued use despite harm, loss of control, attempts to cut down salience and reduce involvement. And I personally think the pathognomonic indicator for addiction is this, and that is craving and obsession. I mean, that's the nasty thing. And those of us in recovery know how nasty that is. But craving and obsession is a big thing. We'll probably talk about it later. Addiction's like a lot of other diseases. We look at this as a heart scan, good blood flow. Over here we have limited blood flow. Over here we have a disease brain from a cocaine user. We can see abnormalities on the scans, okay? Just like other diseases, okay? There's another one. Look, there's a normal brain up top. This is 10 days after stopping cocaine. This is 100 days, over 3 months of stopping cocaine. There's still the metabolic, metabolism in the brain is still adversely affected, okay? And this is why they're so crazy for a long time and why we have to keep them in treatment or at least in involvement, okay? I love this study, and I'll show you a couple more slides of this, but in this study, they looked at alcoholics, and they're looking at the amygdala, which is sort of the emotional memory of the brain, okay? Not like just a basic memory, but the emotional memory of the brain. And they had a whole bunch of normies and alcoholics. You guys know what normies are? Those of us in recovery hate normies. You guys are the ones that'll take like half a glass of wine, and your face goes numb like, I'm done. You're never going to be an alcoholic, okay? But those are normal. Or you try some cocaine once, and then they never use it again or something like that. So they're normies. Right? Then they took alcoholics. And they showed them all like a chair, okay? And they looked at the emotional memory, and they're like, so what? It's a chair. Both the alcoholics and the normies, it's nothing lit up. They showed the normies alcohol. Nothing happens to them. It's just they say alcohol. I may have tried it or not, nothing. They showed alcoholics alcohol, and it lit up in this emotional part of the brain. They remember, I like this stuff a lot. This stuff is really important to me, okay? Here's another one where they took cocaine addicts and they showed them a nature video. Again, see, the amygdala lit up. Here's again, the same thing. Also the anterior cingulate there. We've got the emotional memory, and then we've got in here does the other things, but reward expectancy, okay? This is where the area of the brain we're dealing with craving and stuff, and again, it lights up. So again, we can identify areas of the brain that have abnormalities, just like other diseases. Now, some brain injuries are obvious. This person survived, or I wouldn't have shown it, okay? But addiction's in the middle of the brain, center of the brain, okay? It's in the limbic system, just sort of where it starts. And we look at the interactions between other parts of the brain. So, it's a little weird standing by that big giant screen. I'm just going to go back here and read the slides, okay? So, the limbic system, what does the limbic system do? It deals with emotion, okay? It deals with behavior. It deals with motivation, long-term memory, and also olfaction, which I like this one because, you guys ever had a smell and it flashes you right back to something? Just like this perfume, White Shoulders, reminds me of my grandmother, okay? So that's a big thing. You can have triggers from this. So the limbic system is the reward center of the brain, all right? So before we move on, if we call this a disease, a disorder, a syndrome, or FUBAR, if you don't know what that is, talk to your neighbor, okay? I really don't care what you call it, okay? Because there's a malfunction in the brain, right? It's a malfunction in the brain that needs treatment, okay? And people, oh man, I gave it away. Hope you didn't see it. People with disease, disorder, syndromes are called what? What do we call them? You guys read it? I blew it. They're called patients, right? All right. And this is important because, oh, and by the way, this is an aside, sorry. You guys are all therapists, right? This client stuff drives me nuts, all right? Anyway, just an aside. They always call them clients. Anyway, they're patients, okay, to me. And it's important because patients have rights, right? I took this right off a website of like IHC or Mount Star or something, I don't know. Patients have the right to respect and privacy, treatment and caring of a safe environment, quality care, right? Now, some people say, you know what, though? You say they're patients, they're sick, they have rights. That's just going to let them off. That gives them an excuse. No, it doesn't. Because from the same website, patients have responsibilities, too. They have a responsibility to give correct and complete information, ask questions don't understand. I love this one. Inform your caregivers you do not intend and cannot follow the treatment plan. Would you guys like that if your patient says, you know what, I'm just not going to do that? Sometimes they actually do. Anyway, and this is the big one, accept health consequences that may occur if you decide to refuse treatment or not follow instructions, okay? This is right off one of the websites for any other medical problem, okay? So calling addicts addiction, disease, and addicts patients is not going to give them an excuse, and it does not eliminate responsibility. But what it does do is it provides understanding, encourages appropriate compassionate care, and this is the big one, it provides hope. And I think with all our patients, so many of them lost hope, and this is one of the biggest things. And I think that's actually where the spirituality stuff comes in. Even if they don't believe in God and stuff, I think hope and belief in themselves, belief in the future is really important. And that's where we have this spiritual disease. So a few lessons I've learned doing this kind of work, okay? I really believe that addicts are some of the most kind, caring, compassionate, creative people I've ever met. Seriously. When they're in recovery, right? Before that, they're sort of, I can't say what my son who used to take, but they're sort of problematic, okay? But in recovery, and I think this is serious. How many of these people have you seen? They can write a poem, they can do music, and they're just so creative and so talented and stuff. And I think this is part of the problem with some of them, okay? I think some of them feel too much. They feel for themselves. They feel for everybody else. I'll talk to the parents and stuff, and like even when they steal from me, they still feel bad. They're going to do it. I'm going to tell you why in a minute. But they feel bad, and I think it's this pain that leads them to part of the problem. Okay. Another thing, we talk about gateway drugs, right? What are the gateway drugs? Most of the time, we talk about marijuana and pain relievers, right? Opiates. There's actually one that's not on here that I think is the biggest one. What do you think that is? Alcohol. So many times it starts with alcohol. They're at a party and drinking, and someone brings something else. Now, it's not that everybody who smokes a joint, like in reefer madness, goes crazy and uses other drugs. Not that everybody gets an opiate, becomes a heroin addict. But because of nature, nurture, environment, or genetics, they may be more predisposed to do it, and leads to addiction, okay? Now, I bring that up because I want to talk about this. I really strongly believe in gateway experiences. Gateway experiences are experiences in life that can be a gateway to addiction. Things like grief and loss. This is a big one in my life, okay? Traumas, PTSD, war, disasters. It's really sad that 22 veterans a day kill themselves, okay? And so many of them have been using drugs to try and cover up or numb themselves, okay? Relationships, okay, see, I bring it up a lot, right? Relationships can destroy recovery, okay? And it's because it's such a strong emotion and things. Abuse. It's been shown that if you've been mentally, emotionally, physically, and especially sexually abused in your formative years, those are years when your brain is forming, so childhood up into the 20s. If you had those kind of abuse, that your chances of addictive problems later in life is sky high. One study that the same conference they presented, it was 4,000% increased. So it's like if somebody's been through this kind of stuff, they'd be the oddball if they hadn't had problems. And anybody working in addiction knows that you hear some of the scariest, most depressing stories of some of the stuff these people have been through. So just as a side, I want to talk just one slide about chronic pain. The thing about chronic pain, we get a lot of people coming in, they're like, oh, my back's this and I'm back that, and I need it, I have a bad foot, I need these opiates, right? The problem is when people have been using opiates for a long time, and they've had this chronic pain issue, that it's been shown by brain imaging studies that the area of the brain shifts from the acute pain sensory reasons over to the emotional areas of the brain. They're really close. And this is significant because what will happen, and what I've learned is that when people will come in to me and I admit them, and they're like, I had to get used to saying no a lot in this business, but they'll start rambling on and on and on, and I'll have to laugh. I'm not going to give you Percocet, dude. You're in rehab. But they'll keep on coming back and come up with all these excuses. But as you therapists get working on them and you start taking care of their emotional stuff, they stop asking. They stop coming back to me. It's amazing. It's one of the most exciting things in this business. After a couple weeks that you guys are working on them, their emotional stuff gets dealt with and they stop asking for the pain meds so much. The human brain's awesome. It functions 24 hours a day from the day we're born and only stops when we're taking an exam or fall in love. Right? That's another comment about relationships, okay? So addiction's a deep-seated drive. We're talking down in the deep part of the brain again, down the limbic system, and its interactions with other parts of the brain, okay? Interactions with the part of the brain that deal with, memory, motivation, and satisfaction, as well as survival, okay? We have three major, large parts of the brain, the neocortex, the limbic system, and the reptilian system. And what do these do? If we look at the neocortex, that's the newest part of the brain, the most developed part of the brain. That's where we think stuff up. We got computers, we got doors that open by themselves, we have thumb drives, we have this thing. Anyway, so this is where we think stuff up, right? The limbic system is dealing with emotions. And then the primitive brain deals with survival. So just to summarize that again, we've got reptilian brain, survival, limbic system, emotion, and the neocortex is the thinking part of the brain, right? So, considering those three parts of the brain, who do you think's the boss? The thinking part? I mean, we'd probably, if you're dealing with a lot of emotional people, you'd probably think it's the emotional part. It probably is in some cases. But the survival always takes precedence, okay? Survival, the primitive brain has final or first say. It's hardwired. It's instinctive. It supersedes the higher brain, okay? It's autonomic. Now think about this, okay? If you run up the stairs, you really want to have to think, hey, I have to breathe more, my heart has to speed up more. No, you want your body to do that, right? If you walk into the kitchen and you happen to put your hand on a hot stove, You want that signal to go to your brain and say, hey, to the committee and brain, hey, Sally, there's feeling some heat down here. What should we do? I don't know, Bill, what do you think? Should we pull our hand back? Sam, do you think, yeah, let's pull our hand back. By then you're burned. No, what happens? Bam, you're off of there because it doesn't go up to thinking around. It's just like, get off of there. That's the survival part of your brain, okay? It's a reflexive. So, and it's not just about the survival of the individual, but it's also survival of the species. So there's a hierarchy of survival. I like to talk about the 3 F's of survival. And the 3 F's of survival are feeding, fighting, and reproducing. I'll let you think about it, okay? So why are these some of the major parts of survival, right? Feeding. If we don't eat, we don't drink water, we're going to wither away and die, or we're going to get sick and the saber-tooth's going to eat us, right? Fighting. We need something that says, hey, dude, you're in danger. You got to get out of here, the fight or flight thing. We're going to fight, flight, or freeze, okay? So we need this stimulus. And reproducing is a little more about the survival of the species, right? We need to reproduce. We need to have families so we can have more people to hunt and gather. And then we can get communities of families and we can all protect each other and help. So it needs to be deep down, okay? Now the interesting thing about these things is we have problems, all 3 of them, don't we? We have people with eating problems, okay? We have people with anger and rage problems, and we have people with sex and porn and stuff problems. And this is where it's such a deep-seated thing. Sometimes behavioral addictions can be really a problem to take care of, okay? So what happens in addiction is that the brain starts adapting and starts the drug starts taking over, hijacking the brain like I talk about, and the drug starts marching up the ladder of the survival until it's number 1 and we have a new hierarchy of survival, okay? When this happens, drug's no longer a drug, okay? In an addict's mind, a drug is not just a drug. Drug equals survival, and reversing this takes time, all right? And turning off the switch is not very easy and requires help. Now think about this. How many times you have somebody, young woman is like 5'2", 100 pounds, and she's going to the scary part of town to get her drugs? What the heck? Somewhere where she can get killed? Why on earth would she do that? Because not getting her drugs in her brain is more dangerous than going there to get the drugs. This is the craziness of this addiction, okay? Now, let's look at this. So in a normal brain, okay, we talk about salience, okay? Salience is what's the most important thing in the brain, in your life, okay? You mothers, it might be a baby, your first baby, your family, maybe it's your church, your religion, your job, okay? What's the most important thing in your life, okay? And in a normal person, drugs and alcohol and stuff, it's not that important, okay? They may have used it, maybe it helped them relax one time, but it's not that big a deal. Their memory, remember we saw that thing about memory, their memory of a drug is not that prominent, okay? That amygdala didn't light up like that, okay? And then the control mechanisms to not use or drink are still functioning. So, not that important. I don't remember it being that great to me. And the controls are still in place. So they may be the one at the party say, you know what, I'll have 1 drink and that's it. I need to drive home. Or, I have to work tomorrow. I'm not going to have any, okay? So their control is still in place, so they may not go at all, okay? The addict, we just talked about this a little bit. Salience. In an addict's brain, the drug is one of the most important things in their life, okay? They need this drug. And they remember that this stuff is good. We saw that amygdala lit up. I like this stuff. This stuff makes me feel good. And because of use, the controls have been sort of burnt out. So with them, I really like this stuff. This is really important to me. Nobody's telling me not to. Let's go, all right? Let's go use it. Now, it's more complicated than this, and I simplify some of this, just sort of some concepts to think about. But one of the chemicals that drives the GO system is what? Dopamine, right? And we hear about this all the time. The VTH, or the nucleus accumbens, we get that stimulus, and that makes us feel good. That gives us a reward, right? Now, the thing is, though, that there's different kinds of dopamine. We talk about the dopamine 1 types, the dopamine 2 types, and they can do different things. And here we have the medium spiny neurons, or something like that. Try reading up on this stuff, and that'll put you to sleep. So we have the dopamine 1 neurons that say, go, let's do this, okay, let's go after this. And the other ones say, hey, wait a minute, let's think twice, okay? Now, you may have seen these pictures before, and some people show these pictures a lot of addicts. And here's on this left side, this is a normal person, and then we have cocaine, meth, heroin, and alcohol. And we can see over here the drug user. Notice there's not as much red. The red is the dopamine 2. The dopamine 2 has been burnt out, okay? It's been driven down, if you will. What happens is when you like pound a receptor too much, it like says, wait a minute, we got too much of this coming, so it down regulates and doesn't stimulate as well, maybe go away. So we got too much of the dopamine 1-like responses, too little of the dopamine 2. We're out of balance. The dopamine 1 receptor is more driving reward and relief seeking. Dopamine 2 is more like increased inhibition, larger, more, you need more stimulus of that, slows reward is self-seeking, and other options. So one thing I was reading about, it's sort of like the starting line is up here with dopamine 2 instead of like right here. So it allows you to have a more behavioral flexibility, gives you a pause, okay? Now, when I'm talking to addicts, and again, I have to dumb things down for myself. This is my daughter, Alyssa, her first birthday. So we put the cake in front of her, and any of you, right? And you look at the cake, and it's like, I remember I like cake. I like it a lot. I want this cake. And if you just have the drive to go, you say, go, 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 what's going to happen is that. Now, this is my son, Brad. He's living with me temporarily right now, and I wanted him to come because he's never been to the presentation so I can embarrass him. But so you have just the drive to go, 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 and you just go and you just eat it, right? Now, if you have the other part of that intact that says, wait, let's think twice about this, then you might eat celery. Okay, now, I had no pictures of my kids eating celery. My daughter couldn't get her kids to eat celery, so this is just off the internet, okay? But you get the idea, right? When you don't have some of those control mechanisms, you just go for it, right? So we have excess overwhelming dopamine. You have a behavioral stimulated more quickly, you get more impulsive. You don't have the controls as much, rational thinking is unavailable, and we get a battle between rational and emotional, and you get that, right? A little bit about serotonin, and again, I'm simplifying. There's all kinds of neurotransmitters dealing with all this, okay? And so this is just some of the skimming over it, but serotonin is a satisfied molecule, the mood, the happiness molecule. It actually has an inhibitory effect on drug use, okay? It inhibits the dopamine. The serotonin makes drugs less attractive. So more serotonin you have, the less attractive the drug use will be. Now, this can play a part in somebody who's depressed and stuff, low serotonin. And alcohol, marijuana, opiates, psychostimulants all boost serotonin. So along with other reasons that drug addicts and alcoholics are using, is they're actually self-medicating. They take a drink and they boost their serotonin. They take a drug and they boost their serotonin, okay? So low serotonin levels maybe trigger alcohol and drug use. Low serotonin equals lack of satisfaction. Sort of goes along with what we see, right? So you get a combination of high dopamine 1, you have more go, 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 low dopamine 2, low, not as much control, low serotonin, and you get a recipe for disaster. Now, talk about 4 different main parts of the brain. There's other ones. We have the executive part, the memory part, the salience, and the reward part. And they're all interacting along with in these things, okay? And if we look at these, so we have the motivational salience, okay? We have the memory, we have reward over here, we have the control, and they're all working together around here. And so this gets really complicated when you start talking about how it affects the frontal lobe. This is the executive functions. When we talk about the drug use being a lack of executive functions, they can't make the correct decisions and stuff. And so this is all really a tangled web of disease. A brief thing about withdrawal, okay? There's an imbalance of excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters, okay? So when you stop somebody, let's say alcohol, and they've been giving this drug that sort of boosts GABA, which is inhibitory and calming the brain down, you suddenly take that away. All of a sudden you got all the excitatory ones like glutamate, norepinephrine, and that's why they're shaken, that's why they have diarrhea, that's why they feel horrible. That's why they could die with alcohol and benzos, because they get so much excitement they can have seizures, okay? With the opiates, they just get the goosebumps, they get runny nose, they get sick. Now, there's a saying in recovery that starting out with drugs, it starts out as fun, then it becomes fun with problems, and there's just problems. And I bring this up because a lot of addicts, once they get going, they're really down the road of addiction, a lot of their use is no longer to make themselves feel good. It's to avoid the pain, okay? To avoid the pain of withdrawal. And you'll see this if you go on those TV shows on like A&E and History or whatever, I don't know, and they follow some of these people, they're just looking for their next shot because they don't want to go through withdrawal, okay? The other thing is, again, the traumas and stuff, sometimes they're continue to do that. I was at a conference. I go to a lot of addiction conferences, and being single, unattached. She's like, why not? Hey, next week there's a conference. Fly over there and go. And so, and I was at one, I don't know, a year or so ago. I think it was in San Francisco, and I heard this, and it really struck me, and that is that addiction is punishment resistant, okay? You cannot punish addiction out of somebody, okay? Some people do have to go to jail for doing things, but that's not going to cure them. How many times they get a DUI and they go back and they have problems? How many times they get arrested, they come back and they have problems, okay? So this is not the answer. Now, again, like I said, there's a lot of different neurotransmitters, a lot of things contributing to all this: serotonin, acetylcholine, endorphins. Oxytocin is an interesting one. I've actually given some patients this. There's been a little bit of research, but not a lot on it yet. But oxytocin is the chemical release when a mother's like having a baby. The uterus gets stretched and releases oxytocin. It stimulates breast milk, and then it also stimulates bonding. Okay, when you hand that baby to the mom, there's some bonding. There's been some studies shown with Romanian orphans where the baby was born, they stuck him in a crib and just ignore him. And those kids will grow up with relationship issues. And I have a friend who, I was telling her story, she goes, oh, my daughter so-and-so is from Romania, and she has that same thing. And a lot of these people were taken care of have had problems in their childhood, right? And so they may have some of the same problems. So the idea is maybe we should be giving them oxytocin to help boost that feeling. Now, Chris Wilkins, I don't know if he came today, he's the clinical director on Payson, and I mentioned this to him, and he's like, yeah, the last thing we need is more bonding. All right. But the idea is maybe if we boost the oxytocin, they'll have the oxytocin, and they won't have to go over and hug this person or that person and do all kinds of crazy things that you guys know happen in rehabs, okay? Rehab babies. So there's a lot of different interactions, all these things that can play a role, okay? So we've got a brain disease with altered brain neurochemistry, changes the thought process, right? And we get irrational, abnormal behavior. Now I like this one. You guys ever heard of Mark Lundberg, I think? He's a comedian. And I actually heard him at Cirque Lodge like 7 years ago. And he goes around, he's in recovery from all kinds of drugs he talks about. And he has this whole routine. He goes to jails and the rehabs, but also normal comedy clubs. And you can see him on YouTube. But one of the routines he talks about is first thought wrong. That in addiction, our first thought is wrong. And I can't remember all the things, but I remember him talking about, if you're at like church or something, you mention commitment. Everybody's like commitment to God, commitment to church. If you're like in a rehab or in jail, talk about commitment, they're thinking 5 to 10, okay? So the first thought's wrong. Or, you'll hear these addicts like, well, I was sitting there and there was a brick and there was a window, so I just threw it, It's like first thought wrong, okay? The funny thing about this is that here's a dude who's not a doctor, he's not a neuroscience, and he just described in that one phrase what I just told you. That they first thought wrong, that their brain has changed to the point where they're just going to go do things without any, impulsive, without any thinking behind it. Now, I also bring this up because in recovery, there's some important things in recovery. And I had a friend, I was at an AA meeting in Phoenix, and a guy there who had been at a national meeting, and Dr. Paul was there. You guys know Dr. Paul, he's one of the original guys, not first two, and he wrote, what's the word? 417, Babe 417, why can't I think of the word? Acceptance. Acceptance is the answer. Thank you. Acceptance is the answer. And somebody asked him, said, what's your favorite part of the big book? And he didn't say acceptance is the answer. He said page 132, paragraph 2, line 5. And what is it? It comes to like a couple sentences after we're not a glum lot. And that is, we absolutely insist on enjoying life, okay? And that's part of what we need to do. We need to try and get these people to enjoy life again, okay? So how do we balance the flow? How do we curb the urges and refill the control mechanisms? We can do this through counseling, group therapy. If you read under SAMHSA with the Substance Abuse Mental Health, was it Association or whatever, they actually will talk about these two different things, and they are two distinctly different things, group therapy and individual counseling, and do some really great benefit. Mindfulness therapy, do a lot of that stuff, right? EMDR for trauma, CBT and DBT. So what is it, cognitive behavioral therapy and diabolical brain treatment, right? Is that right? That's the way I think about it. All right. You teach that, right? Diabolical brain treatment. Okay. So all these things, and I'll mention it. Oh, I love this. I used to have superpowers, my therapist took them away. I always have this in there, but I don't have therapists to show it to. It's always patients and stuff. So. But as we'll talk about some medications, you guys are working on the part of the thinking part of the brain, the motivation and all that kind of stuff, and satisfaction and stuff on them. So we need to restore the balance. How can we do that? Sleep, exercise. We're going to talk about that. Meditation, hypnotherapy, yoga, Massage. See, what time is it now? Okay, so I'm going to talk about these a little bit later when we talk about self-care too. But some of them we'll go over now. And spirituality and prayer. Also, positivity and gratitude. Now, I've gone to these International Doctors AA meetings, and the first one I went to, there's a guy there, and it's your first meeting, he comes up and he gives you a pin, and it says attitude of gratitude, okay? And so you talk about gratitude a lot. Now, if you're in early recovery and somebody talks about gratitude, you might just punch them. If somebody came to me right after Alyssa died and said, you got to be more positive, I would have hit them, okay? But, you know, one of the things that in my recovery was one day, probably took 9-10 months, I was like, well, this isn't working. You know, me being all mad and hating God and everything like that. And so I slowly started to try and be a little more positive, you know, stand up and smile. And we'll talk about that a little later and try and act that way. And it does help. Now, think about this. You get in the car and you just put the seatbelt on when I'm thinking. That's because you've done it over and over and over again. And what happens is the brain neurons, they change. Now, there's not like one neuron's moving over to this neuron, okay? It's more like the signal, instead of going that way through these things, will maybe go this way, gets used to doing that and becomes a habit. So if we can get people to sort of try and be more positive, have an attitude of gratitude, sort of the things that are good, then it's going to change the way the brain is firing and may help down the road, okay? Let's talk about sleep. Recommend 7 to 9 hours. Average person is less than 7. Less sleep, more stress, higher relapse rate. We've seen this. If they are tired and not sleeping, that can be a problem with relapse. Sleep reduces the cortisol initially. It comes up early, but we need to reduce it when we first lie. And it helps with muscle repair, memory consolidation. And recovering addicts have problems sleeping, right? I like this one. Food is the most abused anxiety drug, and exercise is the most underutilized antidepressant, right? And what am I going to talk about now? Exercise and rec therapy. And I always have to brag, and I'm biased. We have some of the best rec therapists on the planet working for us. Pam, Cammie, Rich, Laura, who else? I don't want to leave them out, but they're so amazing. And when I talk to patients on admission, I tell them, look, you need to participate. You need to go to group. You need to go to rec therapy. You need to go outside. And I'll tell them, I hate to say this as a doctor, that's better for you than the medicine I'm going to give you. Okay, that's going to help you more than the medicine I'm going to give you. Let's look at the way drugs are used before we talk about this. Now, if you take a drug, and this is the dopamine, okay? Meth, look at this thing. You take meth and bam, up goes the dopamine. Get this big surge, right? Cocaine, bam. Alcohol, bam. Nicotine, bam. Food, sex. So when we do these things that are pleasurable, the drugs or activities, we get this big burst of dopamine, all right? And oftentimes it's like too big of a burst of dopamine. Why do people snort the stuff and smoke it and shoot it up? It's because you get the big burst, okay? You get the big shot, and that's what they're looking for. They want this big, great feeling, right? The problem is that this is the way drugs work, okay, and some people with activities, so we get this big, giant surge of dopamine, all right? And if this is the level of pleasure you need to get for dopamine to feel, once you do that a lot, it goes up to there, okay? So now you need more, and you need more, and you need more to get to that pleasure thing. Now, how do we fix that? How do we get these dopamine and all these other stuff back in line? Well, when you do recreation and when you do activities, you go on hiking, you go do the horses, you go do skiing or whatever, this is the way dopamine goes. So we get this nice, smooth, normal kind of supply, okay? And you do this over and over again, and the brain readapts. The receptors stop downloading and get, so we get improvement in people when they're doing rec therapy. Now, if you go skydiving, it's probably that right there, so I don't know if that's good or bad, but. So, rec therapy, fast dopamine, like that one, increases are implicated in addiction, and slow ones are involved in cognition, motor, and motivation. So that's good for you. Now, this is just a slide to show you that people do get better with time if we're doing these things, okay? Here's a normal control. See all the red, the dopamine 2 there? Here's a meth user 1 month out, and here's 14 months out. Look at that. So they do get better with treatment, okay? So when do we use medications? Why am I around, okay? One of the things I heard in a conference, one of the best things is addiction medicine, what I do, is like hamburger helper. We hope it makes it taste better and not worse, okay? Because the real treatment is sitting right here, okay? And them together, okay? Their support, their therapy, and stuff like that. So we're just trying to help things a little bit. But what would we use medicines for? We would use it to reduce relapse, right? We'd reduce cravings. We want to enhance talk therapy. So if a therapist comes to me and is going, the dude's sitting in the corner sucking his thumb, won't talk to me, or he's bouncing off the walls, then we might need something to help out with that, okay? We may need to treat co-occurring illnesses. One of the problems in addiction medicine is, are they crazy because they're using or using because they're crazy? Most of them are crazy because they're using, especially meth addicts. Oh my gosh. And in fact, you really can't even diagnose or treat them for like a month, 2 months or so. So these are the reasons we will use drugs, okay? So one of the drugs we can use, naltrexone or Vivitrol. What does it do? Naltrexone is just like the cousin of Narcan. Goes on the opiate receptor, jams onto it, blocks everything else. If there's something there, it knocks it off of there. That's how Narcan works, okay? Now, when we use Vivitrol, we're trying to work on the center of the brain, these things where we talked about the limbic system, the rewards and everything. And I want to bring this up because this is where you guys are working over here. You're trying to help with all this decision-making, thinking, reasoning, and all that. Now, reducing the bombardment of all these neurotransmitters is going to help too. But the only contraindication for this stuff is don't be on opiates. If you're taking opiates and I give you naltrexone or Vivitrol, you're going to get really, really sick. And so we usually will like even test that you weigh them. And then don't be allergic to this stuff. I don't even know what that is. I don't think anybody's allergic to it. So that's the only contraindications to it, okay? All right. And this is important because we've had people talk patients out of it like they're driving the bus around from the places and, oh, you don't want to use that because that's like a opiate. It's not, okay? It's not a narcotic. Whoa, pushed the wrong button. Not a narcotic. It's not pleasure producing. It's not addictive, and it's not associated with abuse. All right? Those are important things to remember on Vivitrol, okay? This is the other thing. Here's using it. If you're just really, and I talk to patients, I go, if you're really trying hard, you're really, really trying hard to stay sober, you're going to meetings and stuff like that, this is about, you've got a little bit of improvement, right? You go to see a therapist and get treatment, you're up here, your treatment's, you're better. And then if we add something else like Vivitrol, the sober days go up. There's no magic bullet, okay? We're just trying to improve the odds. What about Suboxone? Okay, Suboxone is an opiate agonist-antagonist. It has an advantageous safety profile. And by that, I mean that, like, if you take morphine, heroin, and you keep using it, your respiratory depression goes like this, goes up, 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 so you stop breathing, you die, okay? Suboxone, as you take it, you go up, 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 and it tapers off, okay? So it has a safer safety profile. It's also longer acting, okay? Now, the one important thing, though, is if you're on Suboxone and then you take opiates or alcohol, that safety thing goes away, okay? And you can die from it, all right? It can be prescribed as an outpatient treatment program, okay? And it suppresses and reduces the cravings for abused opiate, okay? Now, a couple of things about it. Buprenorphine is the compound in Suboxone, okay? And Suboxone is buprenorphine with Narcan in it. Now, we'll talk about that. Now, buprenorphine has a higher affinity for those opiate receptors. So if there's something else on there, it's going to knock it off. And this is important to remember, okay? It's the buprenorphine that'll cause withdrawal, all right? When they take Suboxone with Narcan in it, it doesn't get into the system. The whole point is that you dissolve it in the mouth. Narcan doesn't go in, buprenorphine does. The reason for the Narcan is so they can't crush it up, melt it, and shoot it, okay? This is something that a lot of people are confused by. And I have patients coming in, oh no, I can't take that I need the Subutex. You know, that always makes me nervous because they're going to shoot this stuff. So just remember that, okay? But it has a higher affinity for immune receptors, so if they've used heroin within the last few hours and you give them buprenorphine, they're going to get really sick because you're going to knock that heroin right off the receptor, okay? Displaces any other opiate on the receptor. It activates the receptor, so there is some pleasurable thing to it, but once they get going on it, usually that pleasurable part levels out, okay? And it will induce withdrawal if other opiates are present, okay? Again, I'd already talked about the Suboxone is buprenorphine with Narcan. The whole point of that is so they can't shoot it. You put it in the mouth, dissolve it, and the buprenorphine goes in the system, but the Narcan doesn't. You don't want the Narcan in it. That would just be contrary. Methadone is similar to that, and it tricks the brain into thinking it's getting abused drug, okay? It's not as intoxicating as other opiates, and once they get on a long-acting, again, it usually is so that they can, the patients are more functional, okay? It's dispensed in specialized clinic, and it's pretty cheap, actually. I don't know if the clinics charge a lot, but the drug itself, the pharmacists say, is really cheap, okay? These are three of the drugs that we can use for opiates, okay? For craving and reduced relapse. The Vivitrol we can also use for alcohol, okay? Now the interesting thing is there's been some reports that it helps with meth. You can't prescribe it for meth, but you know, a lot of meth addicts are using other stuff. So, and I've had some of my meth addicts come back and go, you know what, my craving for meth has gone away too. So those are some of the drugs that we use. This is just a recent, the last year they did a study where they looked at Suboxone versus Vivitrol, and they both showed reduced craving. The only thing about Vivitrol was it's hard to get people on it. Somebody comes into your office and says, I'm shooting heroin or I'm taking a whole bunch of OxyContin. They're like, okay, great. Stop taking it today. Come back next week and give you some Vivitrol. Well, what's the odds that's going to happen, right? No way in hell. Ooh. I spoke a year and a half ago, and I think it was like 4 or 5 times I let one go. But I came right from rehab, so that triggered me. So anyway. So some of the other ones, we don't have to. Topamax can be used for alcohol resistant craving. Antabuse can be used. Antabuse is a drug where they drink, they get really, really sick. Problem is this, you have to take it every day. The alcoholics just stop taking it. Now, if you have like a relationship thing where the wife is really pissed at the husband, okay, give it to her, and she part of the deal is he has to take it every day, right? GABA, just talk briefly. The GABA is an inhibitory neurotransmitter in the brain. We sometimes want to boost that. Gabapentin and Tegretol will boost GABA, so we use that sometimes. Now, I left a slide in because we have a real problem with gabapentin. How many people have seen problems with gabapentin? Okay, I was at a conference just like 6-9 months ago, and a guy was talking, and he's talking about gabapentin. They talk about gabapentin for everybody coming in withdrawal and stuff. And then he said this. He said, now, there is some reports that there's some areas in the country where gabapentin is a problem. Like, we're one of those areas. We get so much. And just yesterday got a call that a girl's snorting her gabapentin. You guys ever heard people snorting their gabapentin, snorting their Wellbutrin, okay? And the thing about it is, it's sort of stupid because it doesn't really give them the big high. They're using it wrong. I shouldn't maybe tell this because addict, but really if you're going to use it right, you use it with your drugs because it boosts the effect. But the thing is, in addicts, they're just trying to go for something. They just want to do something. Their motivation is take a pill, So that's the problem. Until their brain heals, like we talked about, they're just going to try taking this. Baclofen actually boosts it too. There's some reports of baclofen being helpful. So sometimes if I have a real problem with some muscle spasm, I'll do this. Now, the problem is in the study, they were all the way up to like 120 milligrams a day of this stuff. I don't want to do that. And it can be abused, but you have to use it sparingly. So there's new GABA medications coming out. I was at a meeting once where they're looking at some anti-parasitic drugs that just happen to boost GABA. And the anti-parasitic drugs are already approved for human use, so they are skipping a lot of the steps to get it approved. So anyway, serotonin, we want to boost serotonin. Some people have talked about that, right? And we have the SSRIs and the SNRIs. SSRIs are serotonin receptor inhibitors. It boosts up reuptake inhibitors, so it boosts up the serotonin. The SNRI is a serotonin and norepinephrine, so it boosts norepinephrine also. That's like Cymbalta effects, or SSRIs are like Zoloft and Prozac and Lexapro. Ondansetron has been somewhat reported that maybe it could help too. So I have a low reflex to give people ondansetron when they come in if they're sick to their stomach. So we want to tell people never give up because you never know how close you are to your dreams, right? So there are roadblocks to recovery, right? Oh man, I'm doing pretty good. I talk fast, huh? These poor guys. I'm sorry. He said, you need some baclofen for your hands? Dang. Anyway. So there's roadblocks to recovery, right? Hopelessness leads to desperation, leads to drinking and drugging. Shame is a big one. And it's funny because, again, I have 2 people in here that were the first people that helped me understand this part here. They're the ones that came up with this word, shilt. Do you guys know what shilt is? I know you guys do. Shilt is shame and guilt. And shame is a roadblock to recovery, okay? And for time reasons, I'm not going to ask you, but what's the difference between guilt and shame, okay? Guilt is I did something bad. I made a mistake, right? I accidentally walked out of the store. I walked out of the store without pain. Oh, man, I feel guilty, okay? As long as guilt doesn't go to shame, it's not a bad thing. Maybe you go and correct your problem, okay? Shame is I am bad. I am a mistake. Do you see the difference? I did something wrong. I made a mistake. I am wrong. I shouldn't be alive, okay? This is really, if they're stuck in shame, we've got a problem, okay? We need to get them. We don't want to shame them at all, too. I mean, who's the worst critic of each of us and the addicts themselves, okay? So shame is a roadblock to recovery. And if we look at the shame cycle, we have emotional trauma, turbulence. It leads to self-medication, life complications, increased emotional pain, increased need for your drug of choice, increased complications. It goes around and around and around, and you're stuck, okay? And we need to figure out some way to block that. So no shame, no blame. Anywhere you're working, if there's shame and blame there, you might want to think about going somewhere else. In fact, Dr. Tonigan, down there, I actually brought this up with them. They did a thing where they looked at empathy and compassion, right, in a therapist. And I can't remember how they did it, but they found that if a therapist wasn't compassionate, empathetic, that the patient did far worse. They didn't get as many jobs, and they relapsed more often and stuff. So you really have to have, empathy and compassion for these people. This is just an aside. This is actually where they took some people playing ball and stuff, and they all of a sudden excluded one guy, wouldn't let him play. And they showed that the pain center, up near the pain center, went off. This is just to show that when you exclude people, you need to include people in things. And when they're like isolated and stuff like that, it causes pain, okay? So what about the ignorance? I went to that IDEA meeting. I told you, my doctor, my pusher, okay? Purdue Pharmaceuticals, I talked about this in the 1990s. They came out and said, opiates are okay. Now, before that time, only used for non-cancer pain. For cancer pain, people dying and stuff. Then they came up with this NCPM, non-cancer pain management. And when they did that, I showed you the slide that we went with OxyContin. Started out like 670,000 prescriptions in 1997, and by 2002, it was 6.2 million. Marketing thing worked. But I think the only thing better than that was what the Lucky Strike cigarettes. That was one of the biggest marketing things ever. Chronic pain medications increases pain, okay? Your body has its own response to pain. It's supposed to trigger these endorphins and stuff. And if you're taking pain medicine, it sort of blunts that and it doesn't affect it, okay? It'll increase the number of receptors for the drug. It reduces the endorphins. And you get degeneration of the brain cells and physical dependency. Okay, and I talked about that one part where also can shift it from the somatic part to the emotional part of the brain. They've done studies where they had people with X-rays and they showed the discs, and they had a whole bunch of people with the same problem, and like all these people had no problem, all these people had other problems. If your patient shows up to your rehab carrying their X-rays, there could be a problem. All right. Because that's they want to get drugs and stuff. But anyway, there is some times you have to use stuff, but we really are trying to limit the opiate use. Stigmas. The stigma of addiction, right? Fear of self-reporting, fear of banishment or shaming. Criminality. Nobody wants to get in jail. Poor disease recognition and care. It's a judgmental environment, right? So we have some historical stigmas, right? We have a stigma of leprosy. We stuck them, isolated them. It was a nice island, but still they're stuck out there by themselves, right? AIDS, when it first came out, I was like, whoa, I don't want to touch anybody. I'm going to catch AIDS, right? And then cancer. Now, I bet you a lot of you people don't know that it wasn't that many decades ago that if a woman had breast cancer, she didn't want anybody to know, okay? They used to keep this secret. They sort of felt like, oh, I feel dirty. I don't want to. And this really bothered me because my mother, sister, and grandmother have all had breast cancer and survived, and I volunteered for Susan G. Komen. But this was a thing. They were afraid of it, okay? There was a stigma for some reason behind that. We got over that, right? Go down to the airport, and there's this big-ass plane painted pink. Does ass count? It's in the Bible, isn't it? All right, so we've dealt with that stigma, right? We now have the red bow thing for AIDS and stuff like that. But you know what? The three of the biggest stigma problems right now are addiction, mental health, and suicide. And those are big ones. We still have a big stigma behind it. We'll hear all the time. I go and talk to people who've lost children. The big conferences I go to, are mostly compassionate friends, people who lost children. And the people who lost their children to suicide or addiction, their stories are horrible. Like a kid down the street will die of cancer, and all of a sudden everybody's bringing them, food and stuff, and I'm so sorry. Their kid died of addiction. Nobody wants to go over there. There's a stigma, okay? So we need to deal with that. We're making some strides, but... Okay, Isabella Rossellini, she's got the flu. Anybody tell me where that came from, I'll be blown away. Isabella Rossellini, she's got the flu. David Letterman in 1993, I was watching, a late night, and Isabella Rossellini was supposed to come on the show, and all day long, she got sick. So he had said 1,000 times, Isabella Rossellini, in that accent, okay? And I bring that up because I was in an aftercare thing, and it actually was a Circolage, it was an aftercare thing where there's some people who just came out of treatment, and there was a couple people like a month out just go, I don't know how to function. I don't know how to do this. And it hit me that early addiction recovery is sort of like having the flu. When you have the flu and you're feeling horrible, your hair hurts, everything's sick, you don't want to get out of bed, you don't want to eat, you don't want to go out, you don't want to watch TV, you just want to lay there, right? You're so sick. And when you're that sick, you can't remember what it feels like to feel good. You can't remember what it feels like to want to eat, right? And that's what it's like in addiction. Early on, you can't remember what it feels like to feel good. So just like in the flu, laying in bed. So addicts need help remembering what it feels like to feel well, right? Or to feel at all. Let's talk about this a little bit. You know, some people say this is a choice. It's a choice to use, right? Yeah, sure. It's a choice to take that drink, a choice to take that pill, right? But once this guy here, he has a choice to jump off the bridge, right? But once he jumps, does he have a choice whether he's going to fall or not? No. He's going to go down. Just like an addiction, once they've made that choice, once they've gotten into that, they're going to be falling. And they need help. And somebody help. That guy had a parachute on his back, okay? You know, we got these people trying to pull him up. We got that bouncy thing, whatever that is the firemen use, okay? We need help, okay? So, where am I going with this? A higher power is anything or anyone stronger than yourself that can help you overcome obstacles in life, okay? And we have some available higher powers. We have church, we have family, we have friends. We have group therapy, right? We have nature, and we have God, okay? So we need to, you know, help people find some kind of hope, some kind of positive thing, some kind of help, because when we're in the addiction, we can't get out of it. We're falling, and we need help, okay? Some of these slides are more for family and the patients when I'm talking now. Now, how do we improve the odds of recovery, okay? What can we do? Now, we can look at some examples, and one example would be like, it was like 1960s, and they were catching these pilots, fighter pilots, you know, using drugs. And so what do? They just spent millions training these people how to fly a plane. Do you kick them out? Well, as one admiral said, no, let's treat them, okay? So they would stick them in a treatment center for 90 days or so, and then they'd have treatment afterwards. They have counseling, and most importantly, they'd have accountability. You have to pee in a cup and stuff. And the FAA still does this with the pilots, and they have a 90% success rate, okay, of keeping people sober. Pilots, I'm telling you, they're the most motivated people ever to get back in. I had a guy get a heart transplant, and the next day he said, can I go back to flying? But 90% success rate, okay? The Physicians Health Program does the same thing. Success rate is like 70, 75%. But because doctors can be arrogant a-holes, I didn't say it. And so they think they can do it. But still, 70, 75% is pretty dang good. So if we can mimic these things as best as we can. Now the problem is, you know, kids going out, if you UA and your mom gets mad at you, that's not a big accountability. But so these are some of the things. The more residential we can get, the better. Nowadays, you get 30, 45 days, you're lucky. Then if you can go to day treatment, intensive treatment, if we can just step down to all these different things, we want to go to the 12-step recovery program. And I love that talk by Dr. Tomligan showing how this can be so helpful and stuff. You want sober support. We've seen if people do sober activities and they're participating with each other, they do so much better. We want family support. We use Vivitrol, we use Suboxone, we use these other medications to try and help, okay? Now, we already heard about the 12 steps, and you know, the sad thing is up until like 7 years ago, I had no clue what they were. I got all these diplomas on my wall, I had no idea what the 12 steps were. But I heard when I went to treatment, I heard this, and that's easy simplification of it. 6 words, 3 lines, is trust God, clean house, serve others. If you don't believe in God, trust in something, a higher power, okay? So you need to trust in somebody to help you out of it. You need to clean up the stuff you've been through. And the most important thing is serve others, okay? And you know, when I got out and started going out, I remember somebody told me about a website, what is it called? Volunteermatch.com. And finally, I went and volunteered for Susan G. Komen, and I volunteered at Red Cross, and it gets you out of your head. It stops you thinking about things. And to be honest, I travel around and speak like this because this is like saved my life, doing this kind of stuff. So now we're going to move on. Who's this guy? You guys know who he is? Seriously, you afraid to say? This is me. And I used to always say this and just put it up and they say, this is me. I was up in, by the way, I speak internationally. I don't usually tell people it's Canada. I want to think it's China or something. Okay, but I was up in Canada, and I did this for the first time in front of some first responders I was talking to. And they were guessing all kinds of, you know, people on the movie. I go, no, this is me. This is me like 9 months after Alyssa died. I was up to that weight, blood sugar was 230, my blood pressure, I was a cardiologist with a blood pressure of that, okay? Triglycerides 500, I had sleep apnea. And look at that face. I think my nose is even crooked from all the swelling and stuff, okay? So what's the point behind this? Stress and causes illness, okay? And we're going to move into a little bit of thing. Hopefully I have time, right? So this is from the Compassionate Friends, and I just want to tell this one little story, anecdote, I guess. There's basically 3 kinds of tears, okay? One is like the ones that just keep your eyes lubricated, okay? One is when something gets in it, irritates it, and clears it out. Those kind of tears have a lot of electrolytes and stuff in them, okay? Clear it out. Then there's emotional tears. Emotional tears have more hormones in them and stuff. Now, the interesting thing is if you were to cut the nerve to the tear duct, you'll stop the basal tears and reflex tears, but you won't stop the emotional tears. Isn't that weird? Oh, weird. Shows you there's a connection between the body, the emotions. This is a slide where they actually were able to take an image showing the lymphatic system and the connection between the blood-brain barrier and the lymphatic system, brain and immune, just showing it was how it was connected, okay? So let's talk about stress. Now, we're sort of shifting to you guys and everybody who's doing this stuff, okay? Stress. Coping resources are not able to counteract the demands of the environment. You have acute stress and you have chronic stress. Acute stress, you're driving down the street, somebody cuts you off or the traffic, and then it goes away and you feel better, okay? It goes down. Chronic stress, something happens, you get stressed, and it stays there, okay? Like grief or traumas and stuff like that. So we have eustress, normal stress, and we have distress. There's a Holmes-Rahe scale in which they looked at this social readjustment scale, and they looked at stress. They looked at 43 life events, and they gave them scores. And they found a positive correlation was found between life events and illness. The higher the score, the higher chance of getting sick. This is one of the scales that goes up to, whoa, pushing the wrong button. One that goes up to 100, this was 87. You can see death of a spouse, divorce, marital separation. In one of the talks I give to parents, like they don't even have death of a child on here. I just don't think they wanted to think about it. Somebody came back and redid it and they put like 130 or so. But the thing is, there's also good things on there, if you consider marriage a good thing. But you know, getting a new job, you know, and stuff like that can be a good thing. So you can see if you got a score above 300, which is not hard to get, there's a 79% chance of getting sick. All right? And when I go around and talk to these parents, I'll ask them how many people got sick, how many people got admitted, how many people you know died. And it happens, okay? I love this study. It was a study of 75,000 Danish companies. They looked at the CEOs over 10 years, and they looked at things that happened to them. And they found that if they looked at the financial performance of the company, okay, within 2 years after a death. They found that if they lost a child, they had 21% reduction in profitability. Just the CEO losing their child. And if they lost their spouse, it was 15%. I mean, isn't that amazing how it can really affect your life and your functioning, right? Now, I don't know why they did this. They looked at mother-in-laws. There was no significant change. Isn't that weird? So, anyway, stress releases cortisol. Now, one thing about this, stress releases cortisol, which sensitizes the limbic system to getting problems, like mental health problems or addiction. Okay, that's where these traumas and so. Now, they look at caregivers to look at stress. People are taking, like, if you're taking care of a spouse or a loved one who has Alzheimer's, that's like one of the most stressful things you can do. So they looked at these people. And these researchers here, they were a psychologist and virologist, I think they're married, and they looked at this, and they gave flu vaccine to caregivers and then control subjects, okay? And the interesting thing was they had an adequate antibody response only 38% of the time in caregivers, whereas they had the 66% time in those that are control. So there's something adverse with their immune system, okay? They inflicted wounds to and they did it to med school students, and they looked at the healing, and the caregivers, it took longer to heal. They just like cut their arm or something like that. Chronic stress makes our immune systems less effective, okay? So I may have to buzz through these. Got almost 15 minutes. Cortisol increases blood sugar and glucose, suppresses immune response, aids metabolism, fat and protein. Aldosterone is a mineral corticoid. What it does is retain salt and water, increases blood pressure. Catecholamines, they stimulate epinephrine, adrenaline, they increase heart rate and blood pressure. Now these things are good if you're under acute stress. The saber tooth comes around the corner. What do you want? You want to be able to run fast, right? Okay, you want to get the heck out of there. And so you need all this stuff, but you don't want this stuff hanging around for a long time, right? So chronic stress. You know, the inflammation, you have the immune system that comes from the antibodies and the cells that go do it. You know, have a relative increase in non-inflammatory. Let's skip through this, but prolonged stress gets stress fatigue. Okay, so with the prolonged stress, you start getting a decrease in both cellular and humoral antibodies. And prolonged inflammatory response is called inflammation, right? How many times you hear about inflammation? You got inflammation, we got to treat the inflammation with like doTERRA or something. I don't know. Nothing against doTERRA, by the way. But chronic inflammation, continued release of these immune factors like cytokines, okay? Initiates responses against infection. We get chronic inflammation. And then we have a risk of increased inflammation-induced illnesses. And what are those? Heart disease. You know that if you have periodontal disease, it increases your chance of a heart attack? Okay? It's inflammation, okay? So inflammation can be a problem. Heart disease, osteoporosis, autoimmune disease. You get more stress. You'll see people go through huge stress, like these people I talked to, lost parent, and all of a sudden they've got eczema or something. They got all these allergy kind of problems. Diabetes, and then allergies, okay? the sympathetic nervous system, you get increased heart rate, increased blood pressure. You saw that my blood pressure was what, 240 over 130, okay? And I was on meds, by the way, okay? Anxiety, palpitations, okay? Now, there was a study here, an inner heart study, and they looked at heart attack in 52 countries, and they looked at stress, and they actually looked at this thing called low generalized locus of control. The other word for that, or way to describe this, is a perceived inability to control one's life. How many people have ever had that? Like every day? Okay, so perceived inability to control one's life. And they found that if they, with that, they had a 32%, they accounted for 32% of the attributable risk for heart attack. Just that stress, okay? And to put that in perspective, if you look at smoking, has a higher risk than stress, but stress has a higher risk than like hypertension and obesity. So stress by itself can cause you to have a heart attack. There's a period of heightened risk after a loss. After a heart attack, there's a 21 times risk of having a heart attack within 24 hours and a 6 times risk within the first week. To put this in perspective, anger only confers a 2 times risk, okay? And then anxiety is like 1.6 times, okay? So stress is like markedly up there. And if you've got stress, you've probably got those too. Psychological stressors with bereavement, and again, some of these slides come from the talks I give, but anger, anxiety, depression, reduced appetite, and reduced sleep, okay? Cardiomyopathy, I want to get through this real quick because there's different kinds of cardiomyopathy. There's hypertrophic where it's thick, restrictive where something gets in it, and the most common is dilated where the heart's a little stretched out and doesn't pump right. Most of those are from blocked arteries and ischemia. The other half are idiopathic. We don't know what they are, but there's probably a fair amount, up to like 5% are alcoholics or drugs or something like that. And I have those viruses, alcohol. Women have around pregnancy, we used to deal with those usually get better. But then I want to talk about this, the Takotsubo cardiomyopathy, okay? It's called stress-induced cardiomyopathy. And it's named because Takotsubo is the name of the octopus trap in Japan, okay? And you can see that in this, the tip of the heart is like sluggish, okay? That just from stress, they get this problem with that, okay? And here's an ultrasound picture of it. You can see the tip's not pumping well. This is where we inject dye into the heart. And the ventriculogram, you can see the tip not working well. Now, I don't want to use big words with you guys, but in medical terms, this is bad, okay? And it's not normal. It's abnormal. Where's that come from? Young Frankenstein? What brain did you get, Abby? Abby who? Abby normal. Okay, but now, the point behind this is, anybody know another name for stress-induced cardiomyopathy? Isn't that crazy? This is real. This is real stuff. I actually took care of patients. The first one I said, I go, this is BS. I mean, no way. Broken heart syndrome. It's real. Now, we don't have time, but there's a movie here. This is
Hear about the sudden death of a grieving widow not long after her husband dies. It's usually seen as a tragic coincidence, but now American researchers have revealed a broken heart can be a serious medical condition.
When Cindy Bison's husband Joel had a heart attack, she held a vigil as he fought for life in the intensive care unit.
I was on a spot. I thought I was doing fine, and I thought I was having a very long.
But the stress of thinking she may lose her husband sent Cindy into cardiac arrest. She was suffering from broken heart syndrome. Her husband's medical crisis triggered Cindy's brain to send a signal to her adrenal glands. Stress hormones surged into her bloodstream. A wave of chemicals rushed to her heart and essentially paralyzed.
Okay, it goes on and on. That was in the UK, but you can sort of get the idea. I mean, this is a serious thing. It's amazing what stress can do us. About 2% of suspected acute coronary syndromes are from that. Patients usually recover. Recurrence rate is about 3%. And mortality is about 1.3 to 2, which is not minimal, okay? But the whole point behind this is just to show you the crazy things that can happen from stress, okay? I just like this quote from Shakespeare, because it talks about the heart. So let's try and go on. So cancers increase cortisol, the white blood cell function is impeded, the T cell natural killer cells. Increase depletes adrenaline, which sets up a perfect cancer environment. Helplessness has actually been shown to be a risk for cancer, which comes along with that. Disrupted sleep, okay? And oikos is an interesting thing. Most of the time when a cell breaks off of where it's supposed to be, it dies off. It breaks off the liver and floats around, it dies off. But in cancer cells, they have this thing where they don't die off, okay? And that's how they spread around. And the problem is that stress hormones increase the chances of protecting these tumor cells when they break off, and that won't let the body kill them. So if you want to know, it's this FAK stuff, whatever that is. Telomeres. have you ever heard talk about people trying to keep you live longer? Your chromosomes will shorten all the time, and the telomeres are at the ends of it. And they're trying to give you different supplements or these different things, exercise, whatever, to try and make sure those telomeres stay long. Well, the problem with shorter telomeres is associated with greater biological age. And there's a correlation between stress and advanced cellular aging or shortening of the telomeres, okay? So how do we reduce stress and cortisol? Now, again, this is pointing to us here, okay? We guys have a stressful job, all right? Sleep, exercise, meditation, hypnotherapy, and we talked about these earlier, okay? We want to get as much sleep as we can. We already looked over these. Lack of sleep, the 53% feeling sluggish or lazy, 30% are feeling irritable, 29% have trouble concentrating, okay? So we want a sleep routine. We want to use the bedroom only for sleep and sex. I have to take that out when I talk to the residents. Because, have a calming bedtime routine. Make sure your bedroom is dark and comfortable. Don't exercise within 4 hours. I have a whole thing, a sleep hygiene thing that I have out for the patients about what they can do. If you ever want it, I can give it to you. I'm trying to come up with one for the ADHD patients, non-medication thing. Meditation. This project at UC Davis showed improved mindfulness scores. With the meditation, they had to let go of distressing thoughts, okay? Reduce salivary cortisol, so reduce the stress hormone. Reduce loneliness. Yoga, reduce depression. Relaxation-based therapy. MD Anderson Cancer Institute showed it improved quality of life. It activates the parasympathetic system, which calms down that sympathetic or the excitatory one. And you get reduced the cortisol, okay? Breathing, believe it or not, just this relaxation breathing improves the sympathetic nervous system, okay? Slows heart rate, lowers blood pressure. I'm sorry, these are, we don't have much time. Reduce pain, promote muscle relaxation, reduces the cortisol by 30%. Swedish deep sleep. Now the Reiki, how many people have had Reiki? I wanted my money back, I'm sorry, but they wave their hands around. Now, some people swear by it, so I don't want to say anything, but I was like, what the heck's that? Anyway, it's named after God's wisdom, the higher power. And it's been shown to help people reduce stress and stuff. Hugs. Now, again, I take this one out when I talk to them. Increases oxytocin. This bonding, so hugging. Well, one of the places I spoke at the Compassion Friends, they actually had a hugging booth where you could go and have hugs. And trust, well-being hormone, bonding hormone, love hormone, reduces depression, lowers blood pressure. Spirituality, okay? All these things are just the same things we do in our treatment programs, right? Volunteering, exercise, prayer, meditation, nature. And I told you, volunteering was one of the biggest things for me. Getting outside your head, stop thinking about your stuff. Sort of like that Jewish proverb, I felt bad that I didn't have shoes until I met a guy without feet or something like that, So, whoa, sorry. Other cortisol reduces music, dancing, laughing, sex. Avoid isolation. Isolation causes stress and the increased cortisol. Magnesium. I promote magnesium a lot. Tell them all to take it, at least at night, to help sleep in the morning. There was one recent study that showed it was just about as good as SSRIs in depression, believe it or not. Omega-3 fatty acids, phosphatidylcholine, black tea, aromatherapy, lavender. Dark chocolate. I love this one. First time I ever heard dark chocolate was from Joe, and he was doing an aftercare thing. They actually looked at that. Oh, where'd it go? But they showed, I don't know where they came up with 49 grams a day. I think that's this big, isn't it? Right? So the bottom line is there's a lot of different things that go together for us to have wellness, right? So the final thing, fake it till you make it. AA has a lot of different words and stuff, and one of them is fake it till you make it. And some of them, when you're early recovery, you just want to say, go away. Okay. But the interesting thing is this woman, Amy Cuddy, if you go on YouTube, she has a slide, it's called Effects of Power Posing. I was looking at a bunch of them, and that was at the bottom. I'm like, I don't want to watch that. I was thinking it's gym rats, posing or something. But it's her. And she went to, I think, the University of Colorado for social work. And she was in her class, and she's sitting in the back, just sitting like this all the time. And the professor at one point comes up and says, what's up? What's going on? She said, you know what? They're going to find out I'm not smart enough to be here. I'm not good enough to be here. And he's like, you know what? No, come on. He goes, I'll tell you what. Do this for me. I want you to move up a little closer. I want you to sit up. And I want you to act like you're supposed to be here. Well, it seemed to work. So later, she's now a professor, a social psychiatrist at Harvard Business School, right? So she did this study. And she took them, she swabbed their mouth for cortisol and testosterone. She had them do a high power pose or low power pose, okay? And then she looked and see how much risk they were willing to take, okay? I can't remember how they did it. And then looked at those hormones again. And she found that the willingness to take a risk went significantly higher in the high power pose, okay? Now that doesn't mean necessarily you can jump off a building, but it could be I'm going to go out and apply for that job that I'm afraid of doing, okay? I mean, they take the risk of, okay, I'm going to go do this or, do something positive in your life, okay? And then she found that testosterone, which is the dominance hormone, and cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and all women have it too. We just have too much. It makes us jerks, okay, for guys. But they found that there was a 20% increase in testosterone in people that did the high power pose and a 10% decrease, all right? Cortisol went down in the high power pose and it went up in the low power pose. So what I see from this is, our bodies change our minds change our behavior, and our behavior changes our outcomes. So fake it till you become it, right? So I'm pretty sure this is the end. At the root of all addiction is pain and suffering, emotional, spiritual, psychological, social, right? So in doctor terms, pain is the pathogen, right? So what's the antidote? What's the medication? The medication is love. Whoa, dang, this is fun. Love, care, and compassion. That's the medication, okay? And if that's the medication, again, in medical terms, what's the vaccine? What do we give them to prevent the recurrence? And the vaccine is inclusion, encouragement, community, and support, okay? This is where all that aftercare stuff and alumni activity and stuff come into play, okay? A physician once said the best medicine for humans is love. Someone said, what if it doesn't work? And he said, double the dose. All right, so I don't know. So addiction caused by pain and suffering, relieved by love and compassion. That's it. Thanks.